huge numbers of these meetings have this kind of paperwork as we go through them, and it's not terribly convenient to work your way through that. I think through sets of conversations we'll be able just to use that material which is already there in those mechanisms, just to inform people more about what's going on, and obviously to open up for more input into that as well. One of the key things that concerns me at the moment is thinking about this university and higher education as a whole over a 15-year time horizon. 15 years is quite a convenient period of time for those of us of a certain age. You can remember the millennium, not that long ago for some of us, but there's a way of thinking about what kind of long-term plans do we want to have. We don't necessarily have to fixate on 2030. But what are the kind of long-term plans that we want to do? Where do we want to go? Where should we go with education over that period of time? How do we make our research more relevant? Is that the right question? Is that the right thing to do? Have we got the right balance over that period of time? And also, will we have the right infrastructure for education and research over that period of time, given the age of some of the buildings and some parts of the campus? So one of the long-term
so I'll just make that proviso. So we'll start with a question on accommodation at Warwick. So the question submitted reads like this. The lowest maintenance loan available in the 2016-2017 year will be £3,821. According to the information on the Warwick Student Accommodation website, 75% of the rooms on campus accommodation provided by the university will cost more than this in the 2016-2017 academic year. We understand that the idea is that if you receive the lowest maintenance loan, parents should be able to help you out. But as the government does not consider siblings also going to university and keeps lowering the household income threshold, this is really hurting middle-income families such as mine. Why has building affordable halls not been a priority for Warwick for so many years? Why have all the newest built halls been so expensive? With rumours of Whitefields, one of the only current affordable options, being knocked down, will you provide alternative affordable accommodation?
So there's no plan on knocking Whitefields down. Obviously at some point in the future it will disappear, but there's no plan on knocking it down in the short term. And we need to have a very, very clear accommodation strategy that will deal with that kind of situation. Buildings are expensive. This is a huge problem, and the inflation in the building sector is growing and growing. We've got to grapple with ways of thinking about that. The way in which the university is structured its rents is through a ladder, and the point of the ladder is to try to have relatively higher at the top end in order to help support and subsidise the lower end. We've had lots of debate about the ladder of rents. We have a lot of debate of that through the Student Rent Working Party. The Student Rent Working Party tries to come up with sets of recommendations, which then goes up through the governance mechanism. And the recommendations that came through the Student Rent Working Party went to our Finance and General Purposes Committee, and they were rejected because there was powerful representatives that the ladder was in the wrong place. And I think it's a fantastic example of the way in which the mechanism of the university can work. So there has to be now a review, and we have to come back and make some other sets of proposals. It's probably the case, depending on how you measure it, that 5 of the 20 lowest price student halls of accommodation in the Russell Group are actually at Warwick. So there is a real problem here, and we can see, hopefully, that the real drive on this is the way in which the government has set what it deems to be the appropriate level for the loan in this kind of space. The ladder of rent philosophy is one which I think is very widely supported, and we've got a really important decision to make about how we set that in the right level over the course of the next few weeks. But we need a wider accommodation strategy. There's another question, I don't really want to touch on that one next, which really asks the question of how do we think about an accommodation strategy in an area where Coventry University is growing quite significantly. And it would be very as well as with the City of Coventry, as well as with the other towns as well. The solution, if that's the right word, to these sets of problems are not probably going to be all on the university campus. So we have to think about the accommodation strategy in a holistic way. But the drivers of the challenge at the moment are the way, of course, in which government has set its loans policy, its loans level one, and the massive increase in the way in which building prices have gone up over the last few years. And these are really difficult issues that we've got to get to grips with as a community.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question, which is on a similarly crucial area of campus life, but in a slightly different sphere. It's on mental health support provision, which is a very popular question. So the question itself reads, waiting times for university counselling can be very long and other services are not well advertised. As Vice Chancellor, what will you do to better support students suffering from mental health difficulties, which are an extremely common problem at universities?
So the average waiting time, I am told, last year was 9.5 days, which is an issue. It's good in some ways, but it is an issue as well. We need to bear in mind, of course, we're not talking necessarily about emergency crisis support, because there's NHS support in that space. But what we do know, all of us know, is that the issues around mental health are increasing dramatically across the country, across the student population, across the youth population, and they're becoming bigger and bigger social challenges, and they're becoming bigger and bigger challenges for universities. There has been an ongoing review of student support. There have been 3 additional posts that have been put in to support the work in this area. But again, I think this is something that we need to talk a lot more about to understand and to work together with the SU on the scale and how we can support the general area of well-being over the next few years. I think probably a lot of universities have been the place where we've been adding a little bit more on, a little bit more support on, thinking about a little bit more work in this area, whereas probably the kind of scale of the challenge at the moment means a slightly more fundamental rethink. But again, I think it's a really productive area for a joint set of conversations, because these are the sorts of things that we need to talk about rather than just make an immediate decision.
Thank you. Next question was the most popular question, but it is quite a sensitive one. So again, just to warn about that. The question is reducing sexual violence on campus. So the question reads, the SU has done very good work in this area through the iHeart consent workshops. However, these schemes are restricted to society execs and have struggled to find enough volunteers. Should the university not be introducing compulsory workshops, at least for all first years in the future, to tackle rape culture? Therefore, I would ask the soon-to-be Vice Chancellor, now the Vice Chancellor, what will he do to reduce sexual violence on campus?
So there are a few questions that have come up, which are the really big questions of British, European, Western society at the moment, and most certainly this is one of them. On the campus, in the campus, obviously this is an area of work which is incredibly sensitive and important and serious. When we are talking about offences, we must take it very seriously and, if appropriate, involve the police. But I think there's a much broader question here which is being asked, which is about behaviour. What are the kind of behaviours which are tolerable, which are the sorts of behaviours which are intolerable? And those are things that we need to talk about a lot. Many of us were struck when Jess Phillips made her comment about Birmingham Broad Street last week, and the kind of responses that it got, that surely those are the sorts of things that don't go on in the United Kingdom, what they do, and those sorts of behaviours we know are out there. There's no simple solution. I think if there is a simple solution, then I think I'd be delighted to hear about it. Compulsory workshops, I think, are not a solution for the university as a whole. I think there will be differences of view on that. I know there will be differences of view, but compulsion is a very difficult road to go down. I think it would be quite challenging for us anyway to get that through our governance committees. One of the issues would be sanctions. So what if somebody doesn't come? What does that mean for that person? Are they allowed to carry on with their studies? What this is pointing at, I think, is a debate about behaviour, and that's the thing that we should be talking about. What are the behaviours? When do we say behaviours are wrong? How is that said? How is that shared? How is it aired? And having that question as being, as Isaac says, the topmost voted for question is really important. It says a lot. It says a lot about the sorts of things that we should be talking about as a university.
Thank you. Next question coming up is one actually which mentions student unions, so I'll say something as well after after Stuart's answered. This question was voted on quite significantly. It's something which has been in the press quite a lot. Free speech and academic debate on campus. So the question is, what will Warwick be doing to ensure that it continues to be a place for academic debates and freedom of speech? There is a creeping tendency for UK universities and their student unions to ban discussion of controversial issues rather than allowing for intellectual discussion. Universities thrive if they are places for open debates and where people are able to discuss and examine controversial issues.
So a university's duty really is to support free speech within the law. Can't go without the law. As a university, as a body, individuals can do that, but the university as a whole cannot. It is our role to support academic freedom, and sometimes that is exceptionally uncomfortable. There are things that are said, there are things that are done that a lot of people object to. But it's important to air them, it's important to have debate, it's important to discuss them, it's important to challenge. And I think that's what academic freedom is all about. So I'm not at all comfortable with a banning culture. I'm not at all comfortable with the allegation that institutions in universities and students' unions are becoming more likely to ban people. How true that really is, I'm not sure empirically. There are some high-profile cases. I don't know how true that really is across the piece. But I think it's something that we should try to resist as a community.
Yeah, I'm happy to agree with that. I think it's something which is very live at the moment in the press and has been talked about an awful lot. And there have been a lot of high-profile cases, unfortunately involving Warwick earlier this year with Mariam Namazi, which we got wrong. It's a very public and harsh lesson to learn that if you stray slightly the wrong side, it will go very public, and that was difficult. But it's been amazing how this kind of area has developed so much. You know, people used to see SUs as a place to go out all the time, 5 nights a week, whatever. And now it's much less that kind of situation. It's a lot more about external speakers, debates, which is a really good thing. We've facilitated about 350 this year already, which is more than we did last year in totality. So I think it's one of those where if you get it wrong, the one instance you get it wrong, that's the one people remember. But actually, as a whole, we do a hell of a lot. A hell of a lot goes on all across the university. A hell of a lot goes on at other universities. And it's something which, that narrative, that's what universities and student union wants to do, I don't recognise it. And if it is the case, that's something we need to really stamp down on, because universities are a place where you should discuss things that are controversial and that you don't agree with, because otherwise you're not learning. All you're doing is creating or saying one particular thing just because it's that's what you want to hear. So that would be my take on that one, considering the student unions were mentioned in this question. So moving on to another area, and this is something which has happened in the past, which continues to be a topic of debate. This question is called lifting the injunction. So the question is, what does the new Vice Chancellor think about the fact that due to the previous Vice Chancellor's actions, there's an outright ban on occupation-style protests, which happen to be the types of protests that have been successful on this campus in the past, in the SU building, Barclays, etc., etc. And what does the new Vice Chancellor intend to do to lift this injunction and rectify students' ability to protest in whatever way they deem fit, including occupation-style protests?
So this is obviously a really delicate and sensitive set of issues. So I'm going to try and speak reasonably carefully in what I say here. I think there is probably a consensus that what none of us want to see is violence, is threat of violence, is intimidation, and is destruction on a larger scale. That to me feels like the space that the injunction sits in.
Okay.
Is that going to be a response? Can we ask follow-up questions?
You can ask this follow-up question, but we'll have the chance with the audience later. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I mean, I think it's really, you should elaborate more, because this is an issue that is of huge relevance for the student body and for freedom of speech, democracy on campus. I really think even that you're here in this space, if you could please elaborate what you mean. And does that mean that that the university considers acceptable for the injunction to remain in place as it currently is?
there is space for protest on campus. There have been protests on campus. I wanted to stop more protests on campus, which was a very good debate, very good event. I don't see why one would say that all protest is banned on campus. I don't think it is. I think there are particular things that emerged. There are particular things that I think none of us want to see. But within that, there are a lot of things that people can organise protests around. Protest is a very important part of life, not just university life.
Where do you think the violence came from?
See, but I'm not making that connection, am I?
Well,
I'm making a generic point. I'm making a generic point. That's why I said I hope on that we can all reach a consensus. That's not what we want. That's what I'm trying to say. Those are the things that we don't want. All of us.
Okay, thank you very much for the question.
Speak louder, please, so we can't hear anything from over here. Sorry.
Sorry.
Is your microphone? Because we can't really hear much over here. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions. We'll move on to the next one, which is called Liberate Our Curriculum. So the question reads, the vast majority of the authors, scientists and theorists we study are white men, as are the senior management and senior academics at Warwick. Women writers are often only included in reading lists for topics on feminism or women's issues. The work of people of colour is often only studied when examining race and culture. Please, can we have a curriculum that allows us to study the work of women or BME people?
So, of course, we all know. Can you hear this now? We all know.
It fades.
How's this? Booming. In fact, I might just hold it. That might be easier. I think we all know that there are obviously historical inequalities, and those inequalities are then embedded in the way that our curricula are set out, because certain people from certain classes and certain genders and certain ethnicities had opportunities to do academic work, and it's that work that then gets embedded in the curricula that we have. I think there's no, again, simple solution to how we get around that, because what we have to do is we have to work discipline by discipline on a number of different things. Processes of discovery of people who have done good work, who have been marginalised in the past because of those sets of inequalities. We have to do showcasing where it's appropriate for people in those sorts of categories. We have to work on the mainstreaming of work from all sorts of different areas. But probably most importantly, it's about the active engagement for next generations, of people in the categories that were named in the question. And this is the hard, detailed work of the academy, and you can all help with that. We as a university need to help with that process. We need to celebrate the best work, regardless of the background of the person who has produced that work, but we also have to try and help and support and encourage work from areas, from communities that are underrepresented, and that's a very difficult process. It takes a lot of hard work and a lot of detail. We need to keep talking about it.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more question before we take a couple from the audience. George has got a microphone on hand, so we'll take two questions after this final one. And this question is on gender-neutral toilets. So the question reads, despite repeated requests for non-gendered facilities in the past, non-binary gendered individuals are still currently forced to choose between using male and female gendered toilet blocks in university buildings. No one should have to fear violence or harassment as a result of entering university toilet facilities. Alongside the requirements of non-binary gendered individuals, there are a number of other reasons why non-gendered facilities are of benefit to the university community. Gender non-conforming individuals often face severe harassment within gendered spaces, an issue also faced by transitioning trans people. Those with differently gendered enablers or carers would also benefit significantly from such facilities, as well as parents with young children. A number of other universities have already taken the step of providing non-gendered toilet facilities on their campus, including Nottingham University and Northampton University. Will Warwick do the same?
So I didn't know about Nottingham, and I'm going to find out about Nottingham, and we have to report back and discuss that. I think one of the other things that we'll be able to learn from is in the context of the work that's going on in California. Of course, the University of California has done a lot of work in this area as well, and again, I think there may well be lessons that we can look at and understand. So I do think this is a serious issue. This is something that we need to think about. There are sets of problems that people who are interested in these issues will know about reverse engineering into the existing facilities. I think what we probably need to do is to reimagine these spaces, these laboratory spaces. We need to reimagine what it is that we're trying to provide here. We still have, as a country, again, this is one of those big, widespread sets of social issues rather than something very specific about the university. But we need to think about what kind of facilities do we provide for a whole variety of people. We have a number of people on campus, as everyone will know, who have sets of medical conditions where they have to perhaps give themselves an injection at some point. They need a space as well. How do we think about how we create that better set of facilities? It will be easier to do in, of course, new builds. Because in new builds, new buildings, you can design these spaces in first principle ways. It'll be more difficult to do things in terms of retrofitting. That doesn't mean you can't do it. And I think the first thing we could probably do is work out what others have done, what lessons there are to learn, and then to talk about those in the context of some of the new buildings that we've got planned over the next few years. It's not, again, a simple thing to do. There's lots of complexity, and I think the direction of travel should be that we take this issue seriously and we look at what we can do to make progress here.
Okay, thank you.
Please ask a clarification.
Yeah.
So our previous SE president was told that all new builds would have a non-gender toilet block. Is that still being honoured?
Perhaps don't know. I'll have to find out, come back.
Okay, thank you. So, right, we'll take 2 questions for now. Doesn't mean it's the last chance. What do I do here? I'll take that one and then that one. Hopefully the microphone works.
Hello. So I'm here to speak today on behalf of 3 societies that I particularly know. But I'd like to start by just saying thank you for coming to speak to us today. I think on behalf of everyone here to take the time to speak to us, we really appreciate. So I also speak as an 8th year student at Warwick. While I've been at the university, I've noticed lots of investment in sports facilities, which are fantastic, but almost zero investment into societies, and particularly with music centre facilities. So Warwick has 23,000 students, and a conservative estimate is that at UK higher education, 10% of students play an instrument socially, which applies here as we don't have a music department. So for these 23,000 students, there are full-time available practice rooms numbering 6. Most of the time, you can expect that half of these practice rooms are available for private lessons, making them unavailable for students, which means you can often, particularly during the daytime, wait over an hour for a practice room. With recent cuts to the arts centre funding, student societies, particularly music, are unable to access these facilities because of the arts centre having to take extra bookings to cover their costs. For example, this term, the 3 societies that I can speak on behalf of, the Wind Orchestra has 50% of their rehearsals in unsuitable rooms that are too small for them because their usual spaces are booked by private bookings. The Brass Society is unable to use the Helen Martin studio or the Butterworth at all this term, and the orchestra has 2 weeks where they are unable to find a space to rehearse, and this has got worse, particularly in the last year. So my question is, what are you doing to support something that can potentially be very beneficial for the mental health of students going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know much about that, so I'll need to do some work and find out about that.
I'd be very happy to set up a working group for you to meet with within the music centre.
That would be really helpful. That would be really helpful, particularly in the context of work that we will need to do in the Arts Centre over the next several years. We need to bear in mind the sorts of things that you were talking about. It'd be quite helpful also if you could show me some of these spaces and why they don't work and all the rest of it. I just think I need to learn more before I say something grand in this direction. Those the points that you make are really good points.
Thank you.
Okay, so there.
So last year, a Freedom of Information request by Warwick for Education revealed that 241 workers at Warwick University were being paid below the living wage. Many feel this is totally unacceptable, especially considering the most recent the lowest annual salary at the university. Would you support and facilitate living wage accreditation for the university, its subsidiaries and related institutions? Would you commit to reducing the pay ratio of highest to lowest paid staff?
So it's a very big and important area, and of course it's become, in some senses, even more important with the announcement that the Chancellor made in the autumn that the national living wage is going to be increasing quite significantly over the next several years. So the living wage, in the sense that you're talking about, the Living Wage Foundation, is being supported by this upward process of the funding of what used to be the minimum wage over the next few years. So it's an urgent and important matter for all institutions, for all employers. As I understand it, what the university has done in the past is where there have been times that as the Living Wage Foundation has, in the middle of the financial year, increased as part of its process the living wage level, the university has honoured that with the lowest paid people. In the Living Wage Foundation work that has just taken place, there's been quite a significant increase. So I think there's an urgent and important thing for us to look at in terms of, firstly, making sure that people this year have the pay that they should in that context. But secondly, there's this bigger context to think about what it would take for this university to sign up to the Living Wage Foundation. I cannot commit to that today because it has to go through sets of processes. We have to debate it, but there will be debate about that over the course of the next few months, and the university will take a position on it. I will chair a number of those committees that will go through, so it is probably best if I don't say too much more at this point in order to allow those processes to take their appropriate course.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move back to some of the many questions which have been submitted. We'll move on to international student fees. So the question is, the current fees for international students are set at a comparatively very high price and seem to increase arbitrarily every year without even a polite notification. This threatens the principles that the university outlined in their Vision 2015 strategy and their aims for international diversity, as it discourages more international students from taking on education abroad. What will you do to improve transparency regarding these fee changes, and where exactly the money is invested after?
So the fee changes go through these various sets of committees, so they are seen by people as they go through. They don't take place in whatever the word was, I can't remember now, a fairly random way. They are considered. These are of course unsubsidised fees. That's the nature of this particular set of processes that higher education in this country has been structured into. The fees are published on a 4-year rolling basis. We see no evidence, I'm going to answer in a slightly different way, because we see no particular evidence in the number of applicants from India. The question is, I think, more about what range of students are able to access higher education and those sorts of circumstances. I looked it up, I think last year, in terms of master's provision, there were something like 99 full scholarships that were provided, and I think scholarships is a big area of work that we have to go into. One of the things I think is really important is work in philanthropy. If we look at the United States, I'm not advocating the American higher education model here, but you look at one of the things that American universities are very successful at, and that is raising money through philanthropy, which then goes into endowments, which then goes into scholarships. I think if we can do work in that field to increase the amount of scholarships we can produce, that would be a very, very productive thing to do. It's difficult. There's a lot of work to do in that area. British culture is not the same as American culture in this kind of space, but it is possible, and there are people who I think are supportive of this area. In fact, there have been a number of people who have been very supportive of providing sets of scholarships in the university over the last several years. I think it's a really important priority for the next few years.
Okay, moving on to a question called housing protection. Students have little to no protection when entering private housing contracts, and Warwick Accommodation cannot accommodate everyone off campus. Issues such as getting deposits back at the end of the year, landlord disputes, and living conditions in properties are rife. The SU Advice Centre work flat out with such issues throughout the year. Does the university help in any way as well? And is there anything else the university can do to support students in the short term and long term with the rip-off that is private housing?
So this is another big set of national issues about the way in which the private rental market is operating in a number of towns and cities at the moment. it's an issue and something we need to deal with in some ways. Of course, we can't, as a university, impact directly on that market. We don't have the money, we don't have the resources, but we don't have the ability to shape the market. What we can do is increasingly encourage private landlords into the space of working with warrant accommodation. But more importantly than that, I think over the medium term, going back to something I was saying earlier, we just need to think again about accommodation strategy with Coventry University for students in our area. What are the things that we can do and how can we deal with the pressures that are going to increase, I suspect, in terms of housing costs and housing provision over the next several years, not least because Coventry itself is increasing as a university in terms of its student numbers quite significantly. So again, we need to go back, talk about this, find out where there are problems, and we need to do some collective strategy.
Okay. Next question is called Police Violence on Campus and reads like this. In December 2014, a free education sit-in was violently broken up by West Midlands Police and Warwick Security. Students were CS sprayed, threatened with tasers, grabbed by their throats and pushed to the floor on their own campus. The outrage from this event amongst the Warwick community sparked an 1,000-person strong protest the following day. Will you do what the university has thus far failed to do? That is, publicly condemn the disproportionate use of police violence against students and apologise for the university's handling of the events and subsequent communication.
So we all know this is a very, very sensitive and complicated area of work. It's a very difficult thing to talk about when the IPCC has not yet reported. One of the things that, of course, I have to do in this role, this chief executive role, is I have to look at all of the material as and when it comes in. And I'll do that, and we'll look at this again when that report is coming in. I wasn't on the campus when that happened. I was actually away, and I had, within a relatively short period of time, several hundred emails from very, very distressed people. So I do have, not necessarily people who were there, people who saw what went on. So I do know, I do feel the weight of the impact of that event on the community, the Warwick community, quite broadly defined actually. But there has to be a process that has started, it has to carry through before we make any comment further.
Will you apologise at the end? Because, I mean, regardless of what the result of the IPCC report is, most people can agree that the police actions were disproportionate, major effects for people shouldn't have happened. I think most normal people can kind of see that. So I think it's not too much to ask that at the end of the process you can commit to giving some kind of apology.
Well, I can't until the process finishes, but I do hear the point that you're making. All I'm saying is I've got to see that follow through to the end of the process before I can make any kind of public comment on it. I can't therefore commit which way that comment would be at this point.
Thank you. On to a very different topic, menstrual care product accessibility. So this question is, there is a policy going through the democratic channels of the Students' Union at the moment concerning accessibility on campus to menstrual care products, such as towels and tampons. Do you agree on the points that, number one, the costs of such a bodily function are an unfair burden on people throughout periods? Number two, thus campus retailers should not make a profit when selling these products and sell them at cost price. And number three, Warwick Accommodation should install menstrual care product dispensers in every block of on-campus accommodation so that Warwick improves its accessibility to protection. And do you have any other ideas on the matter?
So obviously this is something going through the SU. The SU is a separate body to the university, and it would not be appropriate for me to comment specifically on what's going on in the SU context. There's a national campaign, of course, around VAT, and I kind of thought when I started reading the question that's where we were going, rather than in the direction of something where the university is a relatively small player in terms of sales of their products. That's not to say it's not an important issue, but it's not really where I thought this was going to be. There are a lot of these national, social, and political issues that you're raising through your questions, and that's quite right. On this first day, I don't have enormous numbers of answers to them. Part of this process is to listen and hear what your sets of issues are, to go away and talk with people and see what sorts of things we can do. I don't really have a fantastic piece of insight on this issue any further than that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is somebody from a sports club who's written in and said they're very much excited and grateful for the funding given by the university for the new sports centre, which is shaping out to be a world-class facility. However, at this current stage, support and funding for clubs aiming to perform at a high level is much less compared to other universities. In fact, sports clubs are not even allowed to employ coaches, even if they had the money, due to resource constraints at the SU, who are incredibly supportive of us. It seems slightly silly to have an incredibly equipped new centre with under-equipped and underperforming sports clubs. Will you consider leading the university to further support performance sports clubs on campus, leading to an enhanced reputation for the university and an improved student experience? Will you also consider reading a report we have created for our club, making the case more specifically for the university increasing their support for their club?
So rather like the discussion we're having about music, this is not an area I'm particularly aware of, so I welcome the opportunity to certainly see the report and perhaps meet some of the people involved and talk about this a bit further. There's a level of detail in the question that I'm not at the moment in a position to be able to comment on.
Okay. I think we'll open it up to the audience for 3 or 4 more questions, if that's all right. So I'll take...
Thank you. Can you hear me? Is that okay? You said in your opening remarks, you value transparency. That's all well and good. Everyone likes transparency. It's important for democracy and it's important for student engagement. And you also said that a lot of the answers to your questions you haven't got any control over. It's national issues or you're not quite sure. But there is one thing which most people are aware of. It was also on the questions that hasn't been brought up yet, and that actually the university does have the ability to change their position on, and that's on freedom of information requests. In the green paper that was put forward on higher education, it was suggested that maybe universities should be exempt from them on the kind of ludicrous grounds that they're equal to private providers. And in the leaked university's response to the green paper, you also said the same thing. Basically, you want to be exempt from these. It was the university's position they don't want to be under FOI anymore. And that's been condemned by the board, that's been condemned by the Royal Globalists, been condemned widely by the student body and beyond. So will you commit to reverse your position on the freedom of information law, given your stated commitment to transparency?
So freedom of information, there are some very difficult things for us to think about freedom of information to deal with. One is it is a very, very clear area where alternative providers are going to be given an advantage. One of the big things in the Green Paper, as we all know, is to create a space where alternative, possibly for-profit providers can come into the sector and they can provide education at whatever fees largely they might want to choose. They can gain enormous information out of existing universities through FOIs. There is a clear imbalance there. So one of the issues that is being raised about the debate over FOI is what is going to be the status of these alternative providers in relation to the existing universities. The incumbents, as is often described by government at the moment. This is a really difficult and important issue. And why it's an important issue, so there's one set of things around the politics, and if you like, the ideology around this, that's one set of things which is important. But another thing is that there is at stake here something about the very nature of what a university is. If you're a private provider, you are going to look at those courses to offer those courses where you can make the most money. And as we know, across campus, different courses cost different amounts of money. If you are studying chemistry and you need a teaching lab and materials and technicians and everything that goes with it, it is going to be an expensive business in relation to more classroom-based subject. We don't want to get into a position where alternative providers are able to pick off, as it were, lucrative areas and undermine the notion of what a university is, because they will be monocultural in some ways, 1 or 2 subjects only. This is a big debate that we need to have with government, but in some ways, more importantly, it's a big debate that needs to be got out there. And FOI is one way of having that conversation, because it does exactly what you said. It actually makes people stand up and say, well, what's going on here? There's a problem also about the mechanism of FOI. FOIs take a huge amount of time and resource to complete, which is absolutely right and proper transparency into the heart and culture of the institution more firmly, more squarely, more mainstreamly, whatever term you want to use. And that's something that I want to really focus on with you, if that's possible.
Just quickly on that, I mean, we are going to disagree seemingly, unfortunately, but pretty much the whole student body is behind us on this one, and all of the student journalist world is behind us. Like, we can't just expect the university to hand us things. You know, the university might be doing things which students ought to know about, and FOI is a way of finding them out, and there's lots of examples of that. Isn't the logic of you said that it's right and proper that we should have freedom of information request mechanisms, despite some of the other things you said. Shouldn't the result of your opinion be that you should be lobbying for private providers to also be under the FOI Act, rather than lobbying for you to be exempt?
So there's sort of, what's the heart of the problem here? The heart of the problem here is that there are different types of organisation. Private companies, public sector, and education charities. Charities in this general. We're an education charity. We're not private sector, we're not public sector. Government wants, with the descriptor of public body, to try to include a large number of charities, universities, into that public sector space, which is how they can put more regulation in. They do not want to put private companies in that space. That is not part of any way, shape or form of their thinking. Were that to be the case, were they to think there is a sector-wide way of addressing these sets of issues, then there's room for a conversation. But I think it's pretty clear that that's not the way in which they want to operate. That's not where they're thinking. They see the alternative providers very much in this private sector space, which are not covered by those FOI requirements.
You don't think that's helped on by the fact that the Russell Group is directly lobbying for them to continue thinking that, by saying that we don't want to be, the Russell Group shouldn't be part of FOIs? I mean, the Russell Group has quite a lot of power, so if they lobbied the government to make private providers part of FOI legislation, that might turn the debate.
I don't think the power balances work quite in that way. But I mean, I think we can certainly talk about that. I don't think the Russell Group has that kind of influence over the direction of government policy at the moment.
Thank you, Colin.
Hi, I'm speaking on behalf of the SU Postgraduate Exec. I'd like to ask, it's currently the case that hundreds of postgraduate students, particularly in WBS and WMG, are unable to participate in Wednesday afternoon sports and have their weekends disrupted due to the timetable of classes in these times. Do you think this is fair, given that undergraduate students are not subject to the same scheduling constraints?
So we've got into this position because of some tremendous demand for some of the courses, as you well know, that has led to increased amount of teaching in order to cover those students. This is not an ideal circumstance. This is not where we want to be. This is absolutely not the plan. And one of the things that we're talking about at the moment is how we try to be more exact, more precise over the way in which we plan, so that we don't have those kinds of knock-on consequences. There have been, I'm sure, sitting on the postgrad executive will know all sorts of consequences that schools have been trying to deal with over the course of last term, beginning part of last term. Where you have courses where there is tremendous volatility, it's incredibly difficult, and we've got to find better mechanisms for managing this. I believe the number of the variation of the number of students on MBA between last year and this year is something like 519. That's not a deliberate policy. That's the nature of the demand that comes in, which is very hard to manage. It's very hard to turn a student down when you haven't said, if you don't apply by a certain date, you'll be turned down because there is a large number already who have applied. So it's a very difficult area and something we've got to keep working on. The principle, you asked me, the principle is that we want to try to support Wednesday afternoons.
Thank you. And then we've got Cindy, then Sam.
So this is the question about the government's counter-terrorism policy that was submitted, and I think it's really important. So I'm just going to read it out. There's an abundance of evidence that reveals the government's counter-terrorism programme operates in racist and Islamophobic ways, and we've seen examples
So I didn't mean to suggest that the Russell Group has no power. That's certainly not the point I was making. I was trying to answer a very specific question where government, I believe, has a very fixed and firm set of views. And when that is the case with any government, it's very hard to change their opinion. And that is not to say the Russell Group can't do other things. And I haven't been to a Russell Group meeting yet, so I've no first-hand knowledge or experience which to comment or bring to that debate. But again, this is an area, the prevent question that you asked is something that I need to do more work on talking to people.
And Sam?
So hopefully you're aware that February is LGBT History Month. What will you commit to doing over the coming year to support our LGBT students?
Haven't thought about it, need to talk about it, need to have conversations rather than make a off-the-cuff set of comments. Again, very happy to have that conversation at a different time this month.
Is there anything you can say about what you personally have ideas for?
No. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, we're going to go to Safrina at the back, and I saw one more hand from Charlie, and then we'll move back to see some questions on government policy.
Hi, I just following kind of on to Sydney's question. I wanted to ask, why does the university lack any more transparency of how it's interacting with Prevent? I've been trying to find out how it's interacting, referrals, anything, that there's a complete lack of information. And it seems the only way to access it is through information requests. So it should be protected because it seems the only mechanism for students to find out what is affecting the university and honestly affecting a huge amount of students in a really racist and xenophobic way.
I'm assuming that's a statement.
No, I'm asking you, why hasn't the university become more transparent with how it's interacting with Prevent?
I could just answer the referral question.
Yeah, but because it's taken us this long for us to have this conversation now, but if you go
It's
onto
my
the
first
university
day.
website, sorry?
It's my first day.
I know, but I'm saying if you go into the university, but you've worked at this university prior for 7 years, is that correct? So you've been working here for 7 years. If I go onto the university website as a student who fits into the Prevent program, you only just included the right-wing extremism in the last 5 years. I'm also a student. It affects me. I can't find out how this policy that is targeting people like me, I'm supposed to be fine with the fact that it's taken us this long to have any dialogue about it. I just wanted to know why there hasn't been any more public information about the Prevent policy.
So, the last Senate, there was a big debate about this. I suspect there will be at the next Senate, so I think you wouldn't necessarily be able to see it, and that's one of the issues I was talking about earlier in terms of how we take what we do and we make it more readily accessible to people. But I don't think it would be true to say that there isn't some real discussion about the whole Prevent agenda. There really is. But I will take the point, as you've made it in the way that you've made it, that we need to talk more openly about those sets of issues.
Okay, we'll take Charlie, and then we'll go back to some of the pre-submitted questions. Sorry, George.
Hey, thanks very much for agreeing to do this on your first day. I kind of had no smile in your introduction about the bureaucracy of the community stages and how frustrating it can be to get things done. And I really look forward to you said about improving the transparency of the community structures and maybe even that transparency of Senate and Council. I think that'll be a really positive step. But my question is, I was wondering, it's a campaign which I've been working on over the past year, and I've certainly had lots of problems with the community stage, well, getting things through the community stages. What's your view on recorded lectures? And should Warwick have an institutional policy on lecture capture?
So of course, as you well know, the reason you've been having challenges on it is because opinion is deeply split on it. And as it goes through the committees, people have their say and will have their view. I see there's some nice stuff in the corner. Colin Sparrow's gone now, but there's some nice stuff in the corner about lecture capture, so we're in a good place here. But there are a number of people in the Academy who are not supportive, as you well know, because you've been in all those sets of debates. We will take it right through committee structure. We will have debates through committees because that's the way in which universities make decisions. And when you want to achieve an outcome, you can't get there terribly quickly. I know it's frustrating. Lots of people know it's frustrating. But it's the way in which universities need to work.
So we'll move now to the final few set of questions. The first one is on maintenance grants. So the question reads, the government recently voted to scrap maintenance grants and replace them with loans, thus pushing working class students who rely on these grants into more debt than their peers. These grants are currently used by nearly 1 million students across the country, including thousands of Warwick students. Will you release a statement publicly condemning this decision?
So I'm very nervous about this, as a lot of people are, and what the implications of it will be. I think there's also a lot of financial risk for the public finances in this space as well. And this model there, depending on which calculation you look at, planning on perhaps less than 50% of these loans being repaid. So there's a whole series of dangers here. If we're going to take a public position on something of this sort, then it would be a public position that would need to come through Senate, need to be proposed, debated, come through. It would need to come through council, possibly, as a separate route. They're the mechanisms by which we would do this. I'm of the view generally that if we're going to make comments of this sort that are critical, they need to be very clearly evidence-based and very clearly argued. I think that the TEF response, Connor mentioned earlier that it was leaked, and we made it public. It was all going to be public. Some of the arguments there are fairly critical, and hopefully they're reasonably well argued and reasonably well evidenced. There was another example, I think, last year over pensions, because of the dramatic changes, some of you will know, in the way in which the pension provision has been put forward, and that was again argued and evidenced through, and I think that's the way in which a university should operate. So if there are particular sets of arguments in this space, they need to come through those routes and be developed and proposed.
Okay, thank you. So this question is kind of related. It's called, should the university be more critical of government policy? So it says, the Higher Education Green Paper represents the largest reforms to higher education in a generation. It will increase cost of education for students, place a greater administrative burden on staff, and potentially damage UK higher education by allowing new private providers. Why has Warwick, as such an influential university, been silent on condemning these proposals? Do you think, as Warwick has a privileged position in society as a respected university, we should be doing more to protect higher education from government cuts and reforms?
So I think all of that analysis is potentially correct. And I say that no go sent around this morning that I think there are some real challenges, to put it euphemistically, in this whole space. The TEF is something which, on the one hand, could be a productive thing, again, still more emphasis and focus on teaching and excellence. Could be hugely risky as well. It's a very difficult space there. How do we calibrate these kind of responses? It's kind of see the answer I just gave, really. I think we calibrate these responses going through those mechanisms, making a careful and argued case. The university, as expressed through senates and councils, tends to be a fairly calibrated speaker. And I know that doesn't appeal necessarily to people with a more activist mindset, but that is the nature of the way in which the university operates and works, and that's the way in which we get support for particular sets of proposals.
Okay. So the next question is, will the university provide grants or loans for master's courses? Government offer of a £10,000 loan for both tuition and maintenance for home students is welcome, but is short of the demands for many master's courses. Does the university plan to either increase the number of grants available or to provide bursaries for students in financial hardship?
So we have hardship funds. We have, as I was saying earlier, I think 99 studentships in this space last year. Both the university and the Students' Union, of course, made a response on the level of loans which government did not accept. And individual departments are looking in this space to see what they can do. It's a very constrained and difficult space. And it's something that I know we'll all be thinking about through our financial planning round, because this all costs money, which goes on over the next several months.
I think there's a follow-up question, which is, given that the university did provide the postgraduate support scheme last year and the year before, why is it this year decided not to put aside that £500,000 for postgraduates, which was in the form of widening
moving towards the end now, so I'll just ask a couple more questions that have come in. So one of these is on car parking spaces on campus, which I'm just going to find because my internet's conveniently gone. In which case, probably best that we move back to something else on here. So this is from the president of Rowing. Rowing, you here? At the back. This is around, specifically around their report that they're making for their club, increasing the support for rowing. So it's again a question around the current support and funding for clubs aiming to perform at a high level is much less compared to other universities. Will you engage directly with rowing?
So quite happy to have those conversations as with the answer to the sport question earlier on. I don't know if we are significantly off pace in terms of the funding. I just don't know that we provide that space. So very happy to have that conversation.
Okay, right. Internet's back on, which is fantastic. So I'll carry on with the question that I just asked. I started. Parking spaces on campus tend to be mostly full from early on in the morning. Many students drive to school because of the poor reputation of the bus service providers in terms of being on time and seat availability. I would like to ask the Vice Chancellor what future plans are there to increase the number of available spaces on campus and how the university is encouraging the use of public transport instead.
So there's a plan to produce an extra 600 car parking spaces over the course of this calendar year. As the answer to one of the questions. Of course, provision of car parking spaces is regulated. We need to get permission from local councils in order to do these things, and local councils tend not to want to encourage too much more in the way of car travel. They want to encourage rather more in the way of public transport. The bus interchange is an attempt to do something in that kind of space, but I know from the questions you have here, but also from lots of other conversations, that there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the bus providers. I have heard that, and people have said that to me a great deal. So there is clearly an issue there for us to deal with.
Okay. Next question is called, do you think there should be a lecture-free Freshers' Week? The question reads, students currently have lectures and seminars in their first week at Warwick. There is a lot of evidence to suggest this is counterproductive and leaves everyone feeling a bit overwhelmed. Are you in support of this idea?
So I'm not going to answer. And the reason I'm not going to answer is, of course, this is a proposal coming through at the moment, and I'm going to be chairing various committees of that coming through at the moment. So it will allow me to maintain that position of neutrality while that proposal gets managed through the processes in different ways.
Doing the proposal.
That was me, yeah. I didn't write the question. Okay, so one that's come in on Twitter is from Jenny Wheeler, our wonderful disabled students officer, who was asked, will you agree to a meeting with her to discuss accessibility of new builds, especially their facilities?
Yes.
Great.
We can meet talk.
Fantastic. We'll turn to the audience now. Anyone got any questions still? All right, we've got one. Let's go to the left-hand side of the room. Then we'll go there, and there. Sorry, George, for making you run.
Hi there. Thanks for coming. This is my sort of third university now, and it takes so much effort on the part of students and student unions to get vice chancellors to come and actually talk face-to-face with their students. So it is actually a really good opportunity, and I wasn't aware that this is going to be termly as well, and I'm glad that it will be termly. So word on the street, or if I talk about Warwick's biggest open secret, is that you and the previous Vice Chancellor have not seen eye to eye for a period of time. I don't really want to go into that, but my impression is that you've been appointed because University Council, or whichever the body is that you're accountable to, wants a sort of a change of tack in how the university is managed. So could I get a quick idea of, I don't know, some headlines, Stuart Croft, like typical policies, you know, what's the new tack, what's the new style going to be?
So I tried to put a bit of that out this morning in the note that hopefully came round to everybody in terms of what sets a new direction. So I think that every institution goes through the process of new directions every so often. Even the big old 800-year-old traditional ones go through processes of new direction. So I wouldn't overly interpret your word on your particular street in that kind of direction. circumstances have changed. There are sets of big challenges that look different now to the way they looked a few years ago, and we just have to engage with those in the way that we can as a community collectively. As a community, which is one of the reasons that I want to have these sorts of conversations and the other conversations, whether or not I've now committed myself to following this on this evening. We are, I think, at a point where there's an opportunity for us as a university to think about the what next question. There have been lots of great events actually last year about the 50th anniversary, and lots of people who've come back who, students at the university a long, long time ago, and talked about lots of good things. And sort of in that, a lot of people have said, well, okay, now what? What happens next? Because lots of contexts are changing. The financial context, about which we've not talked a great deal tonight, actually, the financial context for universities is changing a great deal. The regulatory environment is changing a great deal. But also, in terms of education, what university education is, there are all sorts of different possibilities over the next several years. One of the interesting things, I think, in our debates about the California campus is if you've got money to build something from scratch and you're in a 5G world, what does the university look like? What does teaching look like? What's the balance between the online and the peer-to-peer social media learning and the face-to-face learning? I think there are lots of things of that sort that would be really good for us to talk about and decide where do we want to go over the next few years. I think, as I was saying earlier, in terms of the research side of the work, which is, as you know, a big part of the nature of this university, what kind of research are we going to be able to do? What kind of research do we want to do? What's the balance between blue skies and applied? A lot of those sorts of things, I think, are really important for us to think through over the next few years. I think we've got an opportunity for a bit of development. I like to talk about 2030 because it just puts that into that medium long-term category. So we're a little bit freer to think a little bit more widely about what we want to do. That's the sets of conversations I'd really like us to have. What do we want to be in 2030? What kind of institution? What kind of subject? What kind of education? What kind of ways of engaging with our local community as well? Which is another big thing, I think, given the devolution agenda. It's another big thing that this university's got to engage with.
Okay, we have 3 more questions. If you could put your hands up for the benefit of George. More hands up, about that. There we go. Who's next? Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to the question about the injunction. And you said that you were not making a connection of violence on campus to a certain group, neither to the police nor to protesters. But you said it in connection to the question about the injunction, and implicitly you did make that connection of violence to the protesters, just by mentioning that in that context. And I think, and you said that also before the IPCC report is published, that you cannot make a statement about police violence on campus, that you cannot condemn that. But on the other hand, before the report is published, you are making statements about the violence allegedly from protesters. And I just don't think that is your place, and that is the right way to do this. And I agree, I don't want violence on campus as well, but I think the violence, we have a clear disagreement where the violence is coming from. And also, I just don't think that it's your place to judge whether spaces for protest on campus are appropriate, because I think that's the space to judge for people who are disagreeing with things that are happening on the campus. And I demand that you lift the injunction.
Shift in the narrative around higher education from its sort of transformative value to a more transactional sort of thing. I understand that the university as an institution has its hands a bit tied about what they can say, but in your personal opinion, do you think a better indicator of academic success is engagement with academia or corporate employability?
So what I want to say there is that transformation, that's what universities are fundamentally about. There are other things as well, but it's about transforming lives. That's what education is about. That's what universities are about. express it, you know, okay, there are different ways of expressing it, but if you're giving me a choice between we want lots more transactional or lots more transformational, more transformational.
And there was one more question.
So there was a brief mention earlier of the kind of range of student representation in various committees in the university. I was wondering if you thought, like they have at Goldsmiths, there was room for student representation on the Vice Chancellor's Remuneration Committee. So can see that, I suppose, it governs your wages. And also, a slightly cheekier question, would you be up for telling us what your wages?
I will, but I'm not going to do it today, simply because next week is the council meeting. And at the council meeting, all the councillors are told all the financial outcome of the process last year. They need to hear that first. After that is done, I will let you know formally what the salary is and what the package is. So that should be within the next 10 days. On the Remuneration Committee, that's not my committee, that's the Committee of Council, so I can't speak to that. But there are student representatives on council who can ask that question.
Okay, thank you. So we've had about an hour and a quarter, so there's been lots and lots of questions. So I think we're going to bring it to a close with this interesting question which was submitted today to finish on an interesting note. It's called Motivation of Role, and it reads, has the past unfair treatments of your predecessor, Sir Nigel Thrift, in any way affected your motivation for the role?
No. Haven't you thought about that? I think obviously far enough on the list of questions. So why do I want to do this role? Maybe can I ask that question instead? So I do think this is a really exciting place to be, and I do think there are really great things going on. We can disagree about lots of things, but while we disagree around argument, that's great. That's what university is all about. I think this is a very exciting place. We've got some great students, great colleagues, great things going on, and it's very exciting. I get very energised. Not necessarily at every moment in the last hour and a half, but I get very energised by lots of the conversations and debates and issues that we deal with in this university. It's actually a really exciting place to be. Why would I not want to do it? So I actually really like this place. I really like the way in which it operates. Although we do spend quite a bit of time talking about our committee structure, actually we also do some things very, very quickly as well when we get consensus behind things. And all that actually is very exciting. Some of you won't necessarily accept this, but I think that in the university there's quite a lot of empowerment as well. Quite a lot of people.
On that beat note to end on. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for being here. This is a termly event, as I've said, so this is not the only chance you have to ask these questions. You can go away, do some reflecting. We'll do the lobbying, you've asked the questions, and then we'll come back probably sometime end of April, early May. But in the meantime, please do carry on this engagement. It's been really good to have so many different questions and so many different things, and look forward to reading all the